early in your career, it's a lot about saying yes to everything. Later on, I think it's about what do you say no to and what do you create space for? Because everything is a trade-off and not everything matters equally. So I think the best leaders, the best project managers figure out the things that matter more, and make sure they get their priority and their time.
Hello and welcome to Manage This, the podcast by project managers for project managers. We are so thrilled to have you with us. If you're enjoying the show, we'd love to hear from you. Please reach out to us on velociteach.com, on social media, or your favorite podcast app. Your feedback helps us keep inspiring and supporting project managers just like you. We like to bring you conversations with industry leaders, innovators, and experts who are shaping the future of project management and leadership. And today we're joined by Robert Glazer. He's a true authority in leadership, entrepreneurship, and performance. We are so honored that Robert has agreed to talk to us today. He is the founder and chairman of Acceleration Partners, which is a globally recognized partnership marketing firm. Under his leadership, Acceleration Partners has earned multiple awards, and Robert himself has been recognized twice as a top CEO by Glassdoor. Beyond his business success, Robert is a best-selling author of 7 books, including Elevate, Friday Forward, Elevate Your Team, and How to Thrive in the Virtual Workplace. His insights reach a global audience through his Friday Forward newsletter and the Elevate podcast, and I highly recommend it if you're looking for something else to listen to. And he's going to tell us a little bit about his Friday Forward newsletter, which we highly recommend as well.
Robert has interfaced with so many teams, and as he shares with us, some of those leaders were outstanding and at healthy teams, and others not so much. So we get to learn from his lessons and hear his advice based on years and years of experience that he's had.
Hi, Robert. Welcome to Manage This. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
I've been looking at your bio and some of the information you sent to us, and there's something I saw that you talk about is your Friday Forward emails. I would love to share that with our audience. Could you tell us a little bit about how that started and the impact that's had?
Yeah, the impact is far more than I could have ever imagined. Back when my company was 30 or 40 people, I had gone to a pretty intensive leadership development retreat with Entrepreneurs Organization. And one of the things that we did while we were there was we kind of focused on a healthy morning routine of kind of 10 minutes of quiet thinking, 10 minutes of reading, 10 minutes of writing. And while I really liked that routine, and the reading was, hey, read something positive or inspirational. And, they gave us kind of like Chicken Soup for the Soul books and stuff that was just a little not my speed. And so when I got home, I continued that routine. I was like, well, I wonder if I can combine this a little bit. I've been collecting some thoughts and quotes and otherwise, and I have a remote team of 30 or 40 people. Maybe I'll just start sending this thing on Friday about an idea or a concept. And I did that for 4 or 5 weeks. I didn't know if anyone was reading them, but I liked sending them. And it was sort of becoming a habit for me. And then I did start to get notes about how people were reading them and sharing them with spouses or siblings or outside the company. I was at another event with a few CEOs. I told them I was doing this. I was like, look, I'll send it all to you. And I was thinking, they would maybe copy it, or we call it R&D, rip off and duplicate. One person did, and until this day is on his own. The others were like, this is great. We'll just send this to our team on Fridays. And so I was like, people outside the company seem to be interested in this. And it was all like BCC, and people were adding me, and I didn't have the past one. So one weekend I bought like a $25 WordPress site. I made a directory of the past ones. And I put it on a newsletter system that made it look like a regular email, but that way people could join and sign up. And I threw 300 friends and family on the list, and I waited for the hate mail like the next week. But it didn't come. People started sharing it. Someone wrote an article a couple months later. This is the only newsletter I read. 2,000 people signed up. And 2 years later, I woke up and there's 100,000 people in 70 countries opening the email.
That's awesome.
I renamed it. I tried like 10 names, but I renamed it Friday Forward because it was being forwarded. So it's been like 7 or 8 years. I don't know. I think I've been saying 7 years for a year. So maybe it's 7 or 8 years at this point. I can go by the number. We're getting close to number 500. So
yeah, that's awesome. That's about how long we've been doing the podcast.
Okay, yeah.
8 years?
Yeah, 9 years. 9 years we've been on the podcast.
You've made it through the great quit. I've seen so many people started podcasts and probably not for the right reasons and then just quit them. So it's interesting.
Now, I've got it. Before I jump into details with you, I want to ask this question. When I was looking at some of your websites and some of the postings, There was an image of you. I think you were on the Dr. Oz show, and I'm a big fan of the Shark Tank. And one of the sharks, I think Barbara was, I don't know if she was a guest of Dr. Oz. I don't know if she heard you were going to be on there, so she came on just to meet you. But you got to tell me, well, give me all I saw was
that would
picture.
be a false distortion of the truth. I thought I removed that picture since he's become a lot more controversial these days. But,
yeah.
So my business, the Core Business Acceleration Partners, was in this field of affiliate marketing, and there was basically there were a bunch of folks who were out there kind of selling crappy products, saying they were endorsed by Dr. Oz and getting commissions on them, and he kind of couldn't shut it down. And so he was trying to understand the affiliate industry. Someone gave him my number, a lawyer called me, and he had me come on the show, and Barbara was on, kind of just talk about this sort of web of players and how it worked and who's who. And he was just really upset that he didn't have anything to do with products or product endorsement. But then people go out there and say endorsed by Dr. Oz, and then they're making money off that. And so I was there as sort of an expert witness, and they were doing an expose. They followed the whole train and found these shady guys approached them in a parking lot and were like, why are you doing this? But I wasn't part of that. I was just part of here's the web of who's who. Yeah.
I just had to ask about that. Well, let's turn to our project teams and our project leaders, because every project leader that I have come in contact with, they want team members who are excited about working on that team, being a part of that team, and producing whatever the result of that project is going to be. What are the key ingredients to create a thriving workplace culture that you've seen that parlay so well over to project teams?
Yeah, I think the first is, look, we're facing a real sea change in work itself, and the notion of a team versus a contractor versus a project or a contributor. And I think it's up for each team member to sort of define that culture and what the team and what their expectations are, hold in. I wrote a book on remote work, how to make virtual teams work. And I've had people come to me and say something like, let me ask you a question. I have this person on my team. They're really good at their job. They do their part, but they don't want to come to any of the team stuff. They don't want to do any of the social stuff. They kind of don't want to be integrated otherwise. And is that okay? And my answer is that's not really a yes or no question. That's what kind of culture do you want? Do you want to say, no, that's not okay, we're about team and communication or otherwise, or we're kind of like a free agent shop, and as long as you get the project or the plan done, you can do whatever you want, but you need to kind of set that and enforce it. So the definition for me of a culture is the core values of the organization or the team, whether they're real, first of all, and then how they're kind of enforced and lived. And I think the problem, particularly with project management, is that it's very task oriented. And what do you do with someone who's really good at that part, but doesn't meet any of the other pieces?
Yeah, that's good.
You also emphasize that success isn't necessarily about doing more, but doing the right things. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, we cannot escape the Pareto principle, also known as the 80-20 rule, which says that, go look in your closet. You wear 20% of your clothes, 80% of your time. 20% of your clients are 80% of your revenue. 20% of those clients are probably 80% of your profit. You can't get around that rule. So it's not about the volume of what we do. It's not about all the things on your task list. It's figuring out those things that move the needle. And early in your career, it's a lot about saying yes to everything. Later on, I think it's about what do you say no to and what do you create space for? Because everything is a trade-off. And not everything matters equally. So I think the best leaders, the best project managers figure out the things that matter more, and make sure they get their priority in their time.
The heart of what we want to talk about with you is this concept of capacity building. I think back to the project teams that I've led. I mean, this really gets at the heart of it, right? It's I want, for me personally, whether I'm the leader or just a team member and contributor, and for all the other members on the team, I want them to be as productive, as efficient as possible. I want them to be happy in what they're doing. I want us to be a well-performing team. So this idea of capacity building is really intriguing from a project leader and a team leader standpoint. And we're going to go into this deeper, but can you kind of give us just a quick flyover of the four types of capacity, and then we'll dig in deeper to each one of those.
Yeah, so capacity building is, to me, the framework of how you get better. And what's really cool about it is that it's a it's a holistic concept of, particularly with people working from home, there's not a work self and a personal self and a family self. Like we have the same strengths and weaknesses across it. And so if we can focus on helping people get better overall, there's a huge work benefit and there's a benefit outside of the work. So these four dimensions of capacity building are very interconnected. They go in a specific order. Spiritual capacity about helping people understand who they are, what they want most, and the standards they want to live by. Intellectual is how you improve your ability to learn, plan, think, and execute with discipline. Physical capacity is a health, well-being, and physical performance. And emotional is how you react to the things that you don't control, challenging situations, the mindset, the quality of your relationships. And again, imagine them as like four quadrants of the ball. I think they kind of all grow and the ball gets bigger and then there's mass. Or if one of those is totally shrinking and the others are growing, that ball is going to kind of fly all over the place. And they go in that order, particularly because I think spiritual is the foundation. You got to understand who you are, what you value, what your strengths are. You got to want to develop in line with your values. And that drives you to the things that you want to get better at and learn. And that makes you want to focus on your physical health. And that makes you focus on the relationships that support that and don't support that. If you don't figure out the foundation right, you can do all the other things really well. What you end up doing is summiting a mountain that you don't want to be on. That's the problem.
This resonates with me so much. And obviously, this is not a new concept, but I think we've all experienced this in our life when one piece of that gets out of balance and other things start to suffer. It's so funny. So, Robert, I went to a small university in South Carolina, and I had a health and physical education professor from Hungary. He was a Greco-Roman wrestler in the Olympics in Hungary, and he was quite the personality. I could not wait to take this mandatory PE class with Dr. Sandor Molnar.
I mean, that's much cooler than most of the normal PE people you hear about. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was huge. He was just this little plug of life. He was amazing. But he was so funny. You know, English was not his first language. And he was so inspiring. And he had this little model that somebody had made for him that was basically a triangle. And he described, he had the emotional, the physical, and the spiritual that he talked about with that. And it was just so fun to have him explain how, you know, if one of these gets out of balance, then life's no good.
Yeah, they're used a lot in energy. I've seen them used a lot kind of in energy. I think this, difference in terms of how do you build and the capability of people. When you think about what organizations, look, we're past the ZIRP, zero interest rate decade of like raise a lot of money, grow fast, burn through it. Now we're on the efficiency and AI. And to me, that playbook's not going to work anymore. And so the playbook that's going to work is like, look, let's grow by growing the people and grow with them. My line is always, if NASA said they're going to put someone on Mars, right, and they fly a ship, it lands on Mars, we're live video feeding this, they open the thing, and all the astronauts are dead, right? You're not going to have everyone like, oh, amazing, the vehicle made it to Mars. That's kind of how companies are like, look, we got to our goal, and like we killed all of our employees in the process.
That's so true. So let's talk about emotional resilience. What are some practical ways that leaders can build emotional resilience, and then I guess within themselves, and then how can they influence their team and help the team build that?
Yeah. So look, in an organizational context, high emotional capacity manifests itself with deep levels of trust, open lines of communication, and sort of organizational resilience. I think the biggest thing is building psychological safety, right? Which is sort of trust at scale. So in the organization, we need to be vulnerable so that people understand us more and understand where we're coming from. And we need the feedback to know what our blind spots are, what we don't do well otherwise. I think great leaders in emotional capacity also figure out a way to get people to focus on what they control, not what they don't control. So think of like, I always pick on sales teams, but like there's sales teams that like, they just never lost a deal that was their fault, right? It was the timing, it was the quarter. Like to me, a great sales leader would be like, why did we lose this deal? And you can only focus on what we could have done better, right? There's no external things. Think about COVID. So COVID happened, every restaurant in the world is closed. And there's sort of two approaches. They're like, hey, we're going to wait until like it comes back to how it is. And we're going to do it because we do how we do it. And then there's like, we got people to feed. We're going to sign up for all 4 delivery services. We're going to figure out how to sell alcohol, wholesale food. We're going to set up an outdoor thing across the street. We're not focusing on this thing that we don't control, which is COVID. We're doing all of the things that we can do. That's to me what emotional capacity looks like in the context of a team.
That's such a good example too. Resilience, that keyword that you said, that just jumps out at me when I think about the incredible thinking outside the box that some companies like restaurant industry that they did during COVID to think, okay, these are things we can't control. What can we control? And go from there. It's good.
Yeah, it is the locus of control. Look, here's a perfect example in a personal life. I won't name names, but there's some people I know, like they have an excessive focus on the weather. I can't think of a more unhealthy thing than looking at the weather 5 and 10. You can't control the weather. So me, like if it's raining, I'm going to wear a raincoat. It's just sort of that's my approach to that day.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's important also in safeguarding your emotional capacity to think about boundaries and setting healthy boundaries. What advice do you have on setting healthy boundaries, but also making sure that, it doesn't impact your professional performance?
Yeah, great point. There's this concept called energy vampires that I talk about. Like people that you're around and they drain your energy and you feel worse. And you actually don't need to have like a big breakup with these people. You just need to stop giving them your energy, stop making plans. Everyone's got this couple that they hang out with every year and they have dinner and like, we should do this again. And you don't mean it. Like don't say it or don't pick a date, but we'll call you. It's the old college friend and you can't stand their partner and you just don't want to do it. So it is so easy to just stop feeding these relationships, these energy vampires. You don't have to have a breakup. You don't have to have a discussion. Just stop making plans, stop giving it your energy, and you will be so much better off for it.
That's so good. And I think of some clients that I've had in the past, not at Velociteach, this is prior, but I think of, some of the long projects that I worked on with the team. And, some of the individuals on the client side, they were those energy vampires. They would just suck the lifeblood out of you.
Well, and there's that 20-80 rule, right?
Exactly.
They created all of your problems, 20% of the client.
Yeah. But I think, for some of the leaders that are listening to this, they need to understand you're human. We're all human. You don't have to do that all the time. You don't have to take the brunt of that. You need to let the team know and then trust them that they're going to step in for you. So if I see my capacity, I'm about to reach that point where I'll say something that I regret to this energy vampire client. So I need Fred to jump in. I need Susan to jump in and have that next conversation or take that next meeting with the client, because I'm kind of reaching my dead battery capacity level. And, just having those conversations with the team and not feeling like I've got to be the hero. I need to go deal with this myself every time.
I think that's really good advice. You realize I'm at my limit. I'm frustrated.
Yep.
I'm gonna do something else or have my AI avatar, listen to this.
Yes.
Dad, this is the know thyself is very important.
So talk a bit about burnout. What are some warning signs that team leaders should be looking for, both in themselves and their team members? And then what action can we take to keep our team healthy and our team members healthy and to avoid burnout?
Yeah, I think people burn out when they are not engaged, right? They're not enjoying their work. They're not working to their strengths, or they just don't see the vision or see why they're doing it. What's super interesting, and I'm always jealous of, Musk in this context, but I would say this line years ago. So whatever, or people at Boeing, because they have this mission vision, like trying to put a plane in the sky or an astronaut on it will make people, right or wrong, walk through hell and high water to do that, and possibly hang around with some really bad cultural stuff, because that's so inspiring to them, right? We either need to give people that vision and that thing to believe in, or they've got to kind of be in their zone or genius. And I believe a lot about sort of core value work. And I think that you don't mind working really hard, when you're doing something that's aligned to your values and you're in the zone or otherwise. Like, it's the stuff where you're like, I just don't want to be doing this. I'm not good at it. This is where it becomes much more of a drain. So I think understanding what people value, what they're good at, where their strengths are, having them work on those things. When you give people that project and they're in their zone of genius, they'll play around with it all night, right? That spreadsheet that you'll do for 6 hours, but then there's another thing that it just feels like a buzzsaw that they're, making themselves go into.
Play to your strengths.
Can you talk a little bit more about the spiritual side? How can a team leader, if they're approaching their group of people that have very diverse backgrounds, they completely come from different spheres, different life standards, How do you, promote the spiritual aspect of this?
Yeah. So for me and most people, this is understanding their core values and their strengths. So what I've done differently on teams and in leadership development is help people figure out their personal core values. Because I think this is how they show up to work. This is how they show up as a leader. By the way, these core values are usually very tied to childhood and formative events and things that they're trying to double down on or run away from. And having done this work with so many people, they don't even realize how it's showing up as an asset and how it's showing up as a liability. A lot of being in a professional service firm for 20 years, I feel like I'm an online degree away from being a psychologist. The difference between this work and sort of some of what happens in therapy is like, I'm not trying to blame people and go back and adjudicate the past. We're just trying to say, look, this is true for you. I've seen adults fighting over a budget in a company, and I know that this person did not feel heard as a child, and this person grew up in a house with never enough money. And that is the fundamental root behind this budgeting discussion, but they don't know it and the other person doesn't know it, and they can't, have the awareness where someone who has to understand they grew up like, look, like maybe they went into finance because of that. And maybe sometimes they're overly focused on protection and downside. And so I think if you really want to be a level 5 leader, to Jim Collins, you need this deep self-awareness, and you need to understand where these things are part of your operating system, and they probably are why you're amazing at some things, and then they're huge blind spots in other areas. The example I always give, we've had a lot of people over the years who have a core value of trust. And usually they have a core value of trust because their trust has been violated. I've seen about 1 or 2 positive examples of trust and mostly negative. I never ask them what it is, but I'm just like, look, did you have a huge value? Okay. Yes, you have a core value of trust. Maybe it's even your why. How does that show up for a leader in the workforce? Well, when people on their team are 5 minutes late to a meeting, they miss a deadline, they can't be found on an afternoon, this triggers very deep things of like, this person cannot be trusted. And they basically, the leader throws them in jail, gets rid of the key, and they have no chance of getting an important project. And they just don't know it at all. And these leaders are just sorting binary. I can trust this person, I'm not. So people on their team feel like I'm in or I'm out, but they can't articulate it, right? Obviously, up front, that leader could be like, hey, you're joining my team, Sarah, and just so you know, trust is really important to me. And here are the things that take away trust. And once it's lost, it's really hard to get it back from me. So these are the things that are really important. Giving them the playbook to work with you and understand you're not going to change that. And again, you're probably a really good judge of character, and you probably, really empower people. There's a pro and a con side to it.
I really like that point. Being open in the beginning, saying these are my things.
Yeah. Our leaders that have taken that learning and gone back and done that have just seen great results. Again, I am who I am, not going to change. When we're 40 or 50 years old, we're not going to change. We're 27, maybe, we can change, but I think we're baked at that point. And so to me, your weaknesses are your strengths overused. So that person probably has super deep relationships and all kinds of things. But again, their weakness is that they probably throw people out, mentally before they've actually deserved it.
This is good. And it's so practical. With projects, we create a team charter, or we create team guidelines. Talking about what's important to us as a team, as team members, what is important to us? Trust, the examples you gave, showing up on time, speaking appropriately to vendors or outside contractors or our clients. Those are things that if we can kind of set expectations at the beginning of our project with a brand new team, man, it just sets up future conversations so much easier. And it gets at, okay, what's important to us? What are our core values? Let's talk it out. Let's talk about intellectual capacity. That was another capacity that you described. And what I'm thinking about there is, kind of sell me on the benefits of continuing to grow this thing between the ears and staying curious. And then how do we inspire the team to do that? And how do we create space for the team to do that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, if you're not growing, you're shrinking, right? And in organizations, I really don't think, particularly today, it's so fast. I don't think anything can stay still for very long. So in the organizational context, companies and teams with high intellectual capacity, they build cultures of learning, feedback, and strong habits. And they also help employees kind of achieve personal and professional goals, and they coach each other to improve. So I think, look, you see teams that have book clubs and learning and feedback, and we're about getting better and best practices, and speakers come and talk. And David Epstein kind of proved in his book Range that it doesn't matter what people get better at. Like if they're off learning Spanish, they'll find some way to bring that back into your room. We're either getting better or we're not. And so that's what I think it looks like in companies that really empower that. And you've got to have feedback as part of it. We all make mistakes. It should be about, hey, here's what happened. Here was the bad outcome of it. And let's avoid that going forward. I have no problems with mistakes. Repeating mistakes drives me absolutely nuts because that's a failure to learn.
I think of some companies that have done this well, that they've created communities of practice, or they may call it an area of excellence or whatever. But I've spoken to some of those company communities of practice, and other companies will have lunch and learns.
Right. Book clubs.
Yeah.
Podcast club is actually cheaper and better than a book club because you can just listen to an hour podcast and discuss it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about that other capacity, which again, I'm back to Dr. Sandor Molnar. He was obviously very physically fit, so he was all about physical capacity. Talk about physical capacity from a standpoint of a healthy team, and talk about the benefits of that.
When I do a presentation on this, I have a picture of a little scrawny guy and a super muscular guy. I was like, how many people are like this at work and at home? Or if you flip it, right, you're the same. So if you're exhausted, if you're tired, if you're cranky, like this is how you kind of show up. So as a baseline, our organization should not be destroying people's physical capacity and our leaders. And ideally, we should be looking for ways to expand it and promoting kind of positive routines, letting people have vacations. People need to kind of recharge. Vacations are a perfect example of how you model as a leader. Look, there's two ways to do this, right? Hey, hi team, Julie, Sam, I'm going on vacation next week. I'm the CEO, right? Going on vacation next week with my family. We're going to be on the Cape. I'll be online. I'll be on email. I'll be on Slack. If you need to reach me on my cell phone, reach out. I'll make sure to get back to you really quickly. Okay, so what does that signal to the company? It signals that vacations are not vacations, that they're changes of venue, right? Alternatively, I could say, hey, look, I'm out next week with my family. This is a really important time. I'm excited to rest and recharge. If there's an emergency, reach out to my assistant and she'll get to me. Otherwise, here are the channels to kind of follow up. I even had a CEO who set up an alias that said, if you need to reach me in an emergency, you can email interruptmyvacation@thecompanyname.com. Those send very different messages, and it's modeled from the top. When Marissa Mayer took over at Yahoo, she was bragging about her 130-hour work week. She set up a nursery next to her office, but told all the women at Yahoo that, obviously like they should take the maternity leaves, but she wasn't, taking one. And what you do speaks a lot louder. We can't get over that 80-20 rule. So I think we should just stop celebrating overwork. Marissa Mayer worked at Yahoo for 5 years and did nothing but destroy value in the company, working 130-hour work weeks and doing 52 acquisitions. You would have been better off like slowing down and focusing on a couple things that worked or mattered. And so confusing this like hamster wheel with productivity is kind of a lose-lose. And people should work hard, but then they need their rest and relaxation. If I ever know that someone's working to run a marathon or a triathlon, it's like, and they want time during, If you ever had anyone on your team who's training for a triathlon, they're going to be in peak mental and physical shape. And you are going to notice the difference at work. And if they want to go run 10 miles in the middle of the day, let them do that. Like they'll be all wired at 10 o'clock at night and then they'll be doing their work.
Exactly. Do you have some leaders that you've seen model this well? There are obviously a lot of bad examples. Anybody that stands out in your mind of they did a good job at this?
You're just seeing culturally. I know Bezos and Gates have talked a lot about like how they get 8 hours sleep. If someone gets less than 5 hours sleep a night, they're the equivalent of being intoxicated cognitively at your company. So you don't encourage people to come to work drunk, but you may be having the same impact otherwise. You just see a little more about people talking about their sleep or their Whoop or their positive health habits or, kind of maybe focusing on how much sleep they got or not. We are culturally a little bit, it felt like a decade ago, it was like celebrating like how little sleep you could get. And then you hear these stories of people just physically falling apart and everything and their doctors being like, you just need to stop. So I feel like the lore has changed a little bit. That was also this kind of grow at all cost era that we're moving out of.
Yeah.
I saw that your company is completely remote. How do you make sure that everybody feels connected, that your employees kind of feel connected all over the world?
That's a great question. And look, we designed our culture years ago, and our core values around that kind of work. It's a freedom and a flexibility. It's an accountability. So that is very designed around that. Everyone kind of feels on the same page. We use hubs. We hire around hubs. We try to be able to be in touch with our employees. We have an all company event. People join our company and they say, look, I worked in non-remote companies and I actually feel more connected here. Everyone's on the same page. We have the same systems. And I've heard that comment over and over throughout the year. So it works for us. It works for our industry. It works how we design the culture. It works for the type of person that we hired. It doesn't work for everyone.
Some leaders, they want to keep the morale in their team. And so they're going to withhold information sometimes, or they sugarcoat the information if it's bad news. How can we tell the truth to our teams and not demotivate them when things are uncertain?
Yeah, the framework I've always leaned on here during crisis is the Stockdale paradox from Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. And that is that the winning combination is that you need optimistic long-term messaging to your team, but you can't ignore the brutal realities, because one of two things happens when you do this, right? You're either, leaders take too much of the extreme. Well, everything's gloom and doom and the ship's going down and whatever. And you're like, well, hell, then I might as well jump off before the next person, right? Or you will lose people forever. And we saw this during COVID. We were very honest with our employees in the first 2 weeks of COVID. Like, it was bad. And we told them what was going on. And some of the younger people who had 10 years, they had been in a boom economy and never even seen a recession. They're like, why are you traumatizing us? Why are you telling us this stuff? And then their partner got laid off. Like, suddenly their roommate got laid off and their company had never even discussed that anything was going on. And they came back and they were like, oh, I'm sorry. Now, I get it. So you either, you tell people it's all great and they get blindsided and they never trust you again, or you tell them it's all horrible and there's no hope. So the Stockdale paradox is like, look, we talk about, we're going to get through this. We're going to figure it out, but like, we're not going to sugarcoat it. Like, our clients are leaving. Like, we may have to take some tough decisions. We got to do what's best for the company. It is really that balance. And that is, it comes from the study of what got people through being prisoners of war. And when Collins asked Stockdale, like, who died first? He's like, oh, that was easy. That was the optimists. They were the blind optimists. They thought they were going home in a month. They thought they were going home in 2 months. And then they were just kind of heartbroken, every time.
Yeah. Christmas would come, New Year's would come. And
yeah,
it's interesting too. It may have been in Good to Great that I read about this too, but I remember, Winston Churchill in World War II in the Office of Statistics. He was so inspiring as a leader, but man, he would cut to it, right? And he would share the real statistics. And that's a good model for us as team leaders too.
Look, I've asked people a lot, and the reality is they want to know the truth. Whether it's hard, they would rather know the truth. But there needs to be a message. Like I said, there needs to be some message that goes along with that, and there's got to be a vision and a, look, the sea's going to be rough and whatever, but here's where we're going and here's how we're going to get through it.
Mm-hmm. Robert, this is such practical advice for team leaders. This is so good.
Great.
If our audience wants to find out more or connect with you, where can they go?
Yeah, all of my stuff, podcasts, books, Friday Forward is all at robertglazer.com. From there, you can jump on Friday Forward, which is moved over to Substack, like the rest of the world. It's free and join a couple 100,000 people around the world.
Thank you. We are all about healthy teams. Personally, I've been on projects before where there's disagreement. We're not all aligned properly. Maybe there's some disengaged members. And I know how hard that is versus the healthy team where people are pulling for each other. It's a lot like sports, right? It's like when you're on a healthy team and your results are just so much better. Plus the journey is so much more fun. So taking this advice from you and all the experience that you've seen, both with healthy and unhealthy, we appreciate you sharing that so that we can be better as leaders too. Thanks again for your time, Robert. Really appreciate it.
100%. Thank you very much for having me.
Looking for an easy and affordable way to maintain your certifications and get better at your job? Our PDU Passport is an all-access pass to every online PDU course in Insight. Take your pick from over 200 high-quality and engaging PDUs aligned to PMI's Talent Triangle, available when and where you are with any connected device.
Thank you for joining us here on Manage This. You can visit us at velociteach.com, where you can subscribe to this podcast and see a complete transcript of the show. You've also earned your free PDUs by listening to this podcast. To claim them, go to velociteach.com, choose Manage This Podcast from the top of the page. Click the button that says Claim PDUs and click through the steps. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep tuning in to Manage This.